Welcome to today's episode of the 1% Podcast, the show where we dig deep with cancer warriors, survivors, and caregivers in order to give you the 1% you need to keep pushing forward. Today, our guest on the show is Paul. Paul was diagnosed with stage 2 Hodgkin's lymphoma just 3 weeks before his 27th birthday. Paul currently lives in Houston, Texas, and is a writer at an ad agency. How's it going, Paul?
It's going well. We're just hanging out. It's pretty gloomy and rainy in Houston, so it's been an indoor day.
Awesome. So Paul and I met through Instagram, and the reason I hunted Paul down in a way was I was just scrolling through looking at different people with cancer stories, and I came across Paul's profile, and I just kind of started scrolling through some of the photos, and I saw how he was just recently diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma about 4 or 5 months ago, and his story really caught my eye, the way he was so clearly expressing himself and really going through all of his treatments with the support of his wife. And I just thought his story would be truly amazing for everyone to listen to and really take a lot from. So, Paul, why don't you tell us today, why do you feel like it's important for you to share your story with our listeners?
I think it's important. I mean, it came so out of the blue. But I've managed to stay pretty positive through it all. I'm a positive person, but I think even when you get kind of a curveball like cancer at 28, there are ways to be positive. There's things to smile about. And I'd love to share why I think life is still pretty grand, even with cancer at 28.
Oh, that's perfect, man. If there's one takeaway that you want our listeners to jot down or to remember from today's episode, what do you think it is?
I think that it is that there's blessings in your life, no matter what the situation, and different things might bring those blessings to light. But when times get hard, if you kind of spin around and look at the people around you, there's some pretty wonderful things in your life and reasons to keep plowing through the tough times. So keep an eye out for those blessings. They're there.
I couldn't agree more. I've said this several times to people that you always find what you're looking for. And if you're looking for blessings, if your mind is on that level where you're looking for good things to happen, you're looking for moments for God to bless you or just to realize what all is really going on, you're going to find those, just like you're going to look if you're looking for the bad moments as well too. So, Well, perfect, man. Well, let's dive into these questions that I have for you. And tell us a little bit about your life prior to your diagnosis.
So I was born and raised in Southern California, and a little beach town that my parents still live there. So we love to go back and visit, and it's kind of vacation when we go home, which is nice. And my wife was out there on vacation herself, and she asked me to dance, and I spun around and said, "That's the girl I'm going to marry." And a few years later, I was in Houston. And so, we've been here. It's different than Southern California, but it's a great place to live, especially as a young person. And I'm super active. We love being outside. I'm a writer at an ad agency, which is a lot of fun. Our office environment is pretty crazy. It's just people throwing around cool ideas, and we tend to have a fair bit of fun to go with the amount of work that we do. And I get to work on everything from radio scripts to TV commercials and print ads and stuff. So it's a lot of fun. And that was kind of the day to day. Just my wife and I, we don't have any kids right now. So just us and going to work and hanging out with friends and stuff here in town.
Awesome, man. So tell us about your overall health prior to your 28th birthday. You said you were pretty active. Did you have any specific things going on? Or I know we've talked before and you said you kind of noticed a little bit of changes in some things.
Yeah, it was, like, I mean, I go to the gym almost every day, and I enjoy going to the gym and being outdoors and doing stuff. And leading up to it, I think like little things that they ended up calling them type B symptoms, you would kind of never notice. Like I was a little bit more tired. I was getting like night sweats, but I was like, oh, it's Houston. It's getting hotter outside. Or my legs were super itchy, and not like itchy you just took off a pair of socks, but like you were like, wow, I'd pull the skin off my legs if I could, sort of itchy, but it would go away like, after a few minutes. So I was like, oh, that's nothing to be too concerned about. And so I came home from the gym one day, I think it was a Saturday, and I noticed that like my lymph nodes around my neck were kind of swollen. And I was like, well, that's weird. And my wife's a nurse. So I asked her, and she said, well, your lymph nodes could be swollen from a number of things. You could be just fighting off a small, cold or something like that. So I didn't pay a lot of attention. And that night, I woke up in the middle of the night, and it kind of felt like I was sleeping on like a tangerine, or something was like in between my neck and the pillow. And so I got up and I checked in the mirror and I lifted my arm up. And that's when I saw a lump raise up kind of right behind my collarbone, in between my collarbone and the muscles of my neck. And I went, well, that's pretty funky. So, but besides these like type B symptoms, like there was nothing super crazy that was going on, which was wild. And they told me later on that had it gone further, there ended up being a large mass in my chest that would have wrapped around my heart, and that would have caused a lot of noticeable health problems.
So as you started seeing these type B symptoms you were mentioning, in the back of your mind, was there like a little voice saying maybe there's something wrong, or were you just kind of used to just kind of plowing through things and assuming they would go away? Since you're active, you're fit, we can all pull muscles and things like that can happen. Was there a little voice in the back of your head that saying, hey, maybe this gets a little worse, I might want to get this checked out?
Yeah, I think so. My wife was like, swollen lymph nodes. And then when I found the lump, I was like, well, that's weird. Like at almost 28, you shouldn't have a lump in your neck. But I was thinking like, oh, I'm going to go to the, doctor on Monday morning. They're going to tell me, yeah, like you pulled a muscle or you did something weird, take some Advil and you'll be fine. I think in the back of my head, after I did the classic WebMD, which they tell you never to do because it always tells you have cancer. And it definitely told me I had cancer. But I think in the back of my head, like all of a sudden these like weird little symptoms and then the things I just found were kind of like converging together. And I was like, this might be something more serious than just a pulled muscle.
So lead us through the moments where you finally decided to go to the doctor and what he said the first day and that story.
So we'd actually just switched insurance. So I didn't have a primary care doctor yet. So we went to the urgent care, like right down the street from my house. And we walked in, it was early in the morning, and we wait for a few minutes. I think I was the first patient that walked through the door that day. And the doc comes in, and you could tell on his face, he's tired. It's early in the morning. And I say, well, yeah, I found a lump in my neck. And his eyes kind of get big. And he's like, oh, okay. And he says, kind of goes through, he's like, well, it could be a number of things. And I don't want you to think it's, people see a lump and they think cancer. And he was like, have you had any, other symptoms? And I was like, no. And then my wife was like, hold on. Yes, there have for sure been like these other symptoms he's had, but like they seem random. And as I was kind of saying the symptoms, like his face slowly started to change. And then I was kind of like, oh, dang, like this doesn't look good. Like he was a great doctor, but he shouldn't be a poker player. And so they took me into the other room to do a CT scan. And when they came back in a few minutes later, they told me there was a mass on either side of my neck, kind of right, the one that was above my collarbone, one right beneath it. And then there was a large mass in the chest wall in front of my heart. And that was actually the biggest one. So when they say like, you have cancer, and he was like, listen, this is an urgent care. We're going to transfer you to MD Anderson, which is it's a blessing that it's here in Houston. It's one of the best cancer hospitals in the nation. And he goes, they're going to confirm all this, but for right now, it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, talks like a duck, and it's lymphoma. And I was shocked, I think. And like I said, kind of in the back of my head, I think I'd prepared for that being a possibility just because you don't normally find a lump in your neck at 28. But I know this sounds crazy, but I was calm and I was peaceful. And I think that has a lot to do with my faith. And my wife was sitting right there next to me. And I just went, okay, like if I've got cancer, how do we beat it? What do we do next? If I can't change the cancer, but I can change the outcome. So let's start working on the outcome.
So tell us a little bit about that, about your faith. So you said you were calm, which, a lot of people, whenever they get that diagnosis, I think some of us just get numb, where it's like, well, wait, what? And just, you start immediately trying to backtrack into how do I get it? What do I do? All these different things. Describe how your faith in that moment made you, as you put it, calm.
Yeah, a lot of questions were definitely running through my head, but my faith, and for me, my faith is being a Christian. And I actually have a Bible verse tattooed on my chest, Joshua 1:9, have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous. Do not worry, do not be afraid, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. And that command to be strong, that command to be courageous, that verse doesn't have a limiting number of situations in which you're supposed to be strong and courageous. And at that moment, I was just like, all right, like this is, and there's, another verse that talks about the peace that transcends understanding. And in that moment, I had no understanding. It was everything goes out the window so fast. And I was like, okay, like I need something now in my life that is a lightning rod, that is like a foundation point. And to me, that was my faith. It was between that and my wife and my greater extended family, like those were the things I could rely on. But in that moment, I was like, all right, big man, it's me and you, and I need some serious help right now. So
what are the odds that you got that on your chest where your tumor is located?
Yeah, it's pretty wild that it was the second tattoo I got. So I've had it for, probably 10 years now, and that it's located right there. And and I love that it's a command to be strong and courageous. It's not like, kind of figure it out as you go. It's, hey, right, carry this with you.
Awesome. So when you heard those words, you have cancer, when they finally diagnosed you after you had went over to MD Anderson, tell us a little bit about like the thoughts, maybe the fears, some of the feelings that you were having when, it was 100% diagnosed as stage 2 Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Yeah. So I think, no matter how strong someone is, fear is definitely present. And, I got a cancer that in my family, we use humor often to lighten the load and to smile through tough situations. And we've called it the whipped cream on dog crap cancer, because cancer is always dog crap. But my cancer has such a high success rate, to almost the 90th percentile. So that was reassuring, but you still have that fear of like, well, what if I'm in the 10%, or what if we beat it and it comes back? And those are very real. I remember my brother and sister flew in immediately. I have an older brother and a younger sister. And my family was there, and we were working through all these crazy things, scheduling tests and all that stuff. And they just kind of came one night to hang out with me, and they were leaving the next day. And I remember seeing the look in their eyes, and it was, I could see the fear in their eyes, and I was being strong for them. But seeing that look, I remember that night I laid down, and my wife laid down, and I just rolled over and I started crying. And I said, I just want to be well again. I just want to be healthy again. Because you something gets stolen from you, and it's something you never see coming. And they say when you have your health, you have everything. And I think there's certainly some truth to that, because in a matter of minutes, in the 3 words, you have cancer, like that was gone, that was taken from me. And so I think seeing other people broken because of what happened to me was really hard, because I don't naturally, as a person, I don't like placing burdens on people. I don't like asking things of people. So that was really hard to see. And I think on the flip side, that gave me some motivation to say, okay, I'm going to beat this, and I'm going to do it for me, but I'm also going to do it for the people that I love.
I love the way you carry that responsibility. I'm very identical in that way, where kind of the same thing. You see the look on other people's face, and they don't, you can read their mind in a way, like they're sitting there hoping you're not going to die, and they're hoping all these bad things aren't going to happen to you. But, they're giving you something to fight for indirectly, I think, in a way, because you feel the responsibility not just to get past this, but the responsibility to, remain alive and stay healthy for them as well too. So that kind of adds a little bit of motivation to you to want to push forward and really get through this. So I think that's, it's funny because they're not trying to do that to you, but in a way that they're giving you strength because they're giving you motivation, which I think is absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
So describe your treatment plan and the medications you were on once you started through that whole process.
So after I got diagnosed, we ended up doing a lot of tests. Like I said, I was diagnosed with stage 2, and technically it was stage 2 unfavorable Hodgkin's lymphoma. And the unfavorable only means that, even favorable isn't good, but unfavorable isn't bad. It just meant that the mass in my chest was fairly large. And so the size kind of drops you into that bucket. So off the bat, we knew we were going to do chemo. And we were either going to do 4 rounds of chemo and then radiation, or we would do 6 rounds of chemo. And a round of chemo has 2 treatments in it. The chemo I was on was called ABVD. And that's just, each one is the first letter of the drug. And about, I think it was after 2 cycles, they dropped the B out, which is, I think it's bleomycin, which is really, really hard on the lungs. So that was nice to get out of the regimen. They did a scan after 2 rounds, and my body had what they call a complete response to chemotherapy. So chemo was doing its job. But I did 4 rounds of chemo, which is 8 treatments. And then last week, I just started radiation. And radiation is Monday through Friday for 3.5 weeks.
How is your body tolerating the radiation so far?
Radiation compared to chemo has been, I don't want to say a walk in the park. I have felt much better after radiation. Chemo just sucks. It's great for destroying cancer, but it also destroys so many other things in your body. And towards the end of my kind of 4th round, as I was staring down 4 more, I was just thinking, I've really got to dig deep. I've got to find something to give me motivation. I was doing chemo every other week because it just beats you up. You lay around, you feel terrible. I always said the drugs that they give you to not throw up are kind of a rip off of a trade-off, because then you're not hungry, you don't want to eat, then all of a sudden you take a bite of food, you're like, oh my gosh, I am really hungry. So you eat a plate of food, and then like 6 hours later you're like, great, I feel terrible again. So like I said, it does a wonderful job of destroying cancer, but it does a lot to destroy the rest of the body as well. So in comparison, like the radiation, they told me kind of around next week I'll start to get really, really tired, and it's a kind of a lethargy that doesn't go away with sleep and stuff like that. You're just kind of always going to be tired. But to me, that's more manageable than just feeling horrid after chemo.
What's been some of the worst side effects you've had with your chemo?
I think just I was like quote unquote useless after the chemo days. I'd get it on Thursdays, and Thursday evening I would feel all right, and then Friday I would be nauseous. I would just have no energy to do things. So something as simple as like going outside, like taking a walk for 2 minutes, seemed like a really daunting task. And as I mentioned before, like having those things taken from you is frustrating for sure. And then, you just feel terrible. A lot of mine was nausea. I never physically got sick, which I was really stoked about because I hate barfing. And, but I just felt bad for probably 3 or 4 days. And it's like an intense flu that just doesn't go away. It's kind of hard to describe.
So as these side effects are happening to you, so physically you have those on you as well. We, especially as men, sometimes tend to ignore some of the emotional side effects that we're starting to
Mm-hmm.
have. And I know you and your wife had been married, just a couple of years before the diagnosis. And we were joking around earlier saying that in sickness and in health, you guys hit that sickness portion pretty early in your
Yeah.
marriage. What kind of struggles, or maybe not necessarily struggles, but what kind of impact did that have on your marriage being somewhat newlyweds?
I mean, my wife is certainly the strongest person I know. And, she's a triathlete. And so that just, she has that grit and determination to see things through, which I find incredibly inspiring. But I'm also a person that I don't like to burden her, like I said, and I don't like to burden my family. So definitely, I think at the beginning when emotions were flowing and everything, it was easy to be scared or to talk things through. And as things went on, I think a lot of times I put on a face that was stronger than I was actually feeling, because I didn't want her to see her husband broken. And there's definitely nights where we would lay down and I would just say like, hey, I'm working through it and this is where my head's at. And I'd finally get to the place where I'd kind of pieced it all together in my head and I could talk about it. And she was really good about waiting for me to be willing to talk about it. But also at the same time, she knows me. She's my wife. She would look at me and just be like, what's going on? Like, I know this sucks. I know you're hurting. And that would just kind of help me talk about it. So it's definitely been an emotional journey for sure. And I've gotten better about just kind of expressing mentally and emotionally where I'm at.
Do you feel like this has made your marriage stronger?
I think on the communication level for sure. Yeah. Cause like I said, I'm someone that likes to get it all in my head and work it out and then kind of come to the table with a complete picture. And sometimes you need that different perspective from someone to actually put the full picture together. And in a marriage, like, that person should absolutely be your spouse. And she's been so good at helping me voice, some nights it was just something simple as like, I laid down and I said, I think this is the hardest thing I'll ever go through. And she looked at me, she was like, well, of course it is. And she kind of helped me talk like about why it was so hard and what I was going through in that moment. And that was so helpful and so reassuring to have such a strong partner at my side constantly through all this. And as I said earlier when we were talking, she's a nurse. So having a medical professional also is been an incredible thing.
It's a huge blessing. So
Mm-hmm.
now your friends, so we've all, when we share this news for the first time with our friend circle, you get a bunch of different responses as well too. Some
Mm-hmm.
people, will not talk to you because they're afraid.
Yeah.
Some people will cry. Some people will hug you and want to be there for you. Everybody has like a different emotional response to you when it comes down to this. What kind of reactions were you getting from your inner circle when you shared with them for the first time that you had cancer?
My close group of friends, I mean, they were blown away. It was, kind of like, well, how's this happening to Paul? Like, this isn't how things are supposed to go. Um, but they were immediately supportive. I mean, I think my close group of guy friends, like in a matter of minutes, were like, "Do we need to be on a plane? Like, what do we need to do to help you?" And so that was really incredible. In some friends, like you said, like I think they don't know how to process it, or they've had a close family member who had cancer, or something in their life makes it really hard to talk about. And I get that, and you kind of respect that. And some people just kind of pull back, and they do the let me know if you need anything, I'm here for you, and you hear from them kind of periodically through it. Um, but when it came to my inner circle, they were on it. My wife and sister actually planned a surprise and gave them a weekend and was like, "Hey, if you can make it out this weekend, we want you to surprise Paul." And they all hopped on planes. We're all kind of spread out now, and came into Houston for a weekend. And it was balm to my soul to have all my kind of brothers here with me, and it was fantastic. So they certainly rallied to the cause when I needed them.
So when you have friends or even coworkers or acquaintances, we all tend to get some advice sometimes, right? Whether it's good or bad or what. What kind of advice were you getting from people? Let's say maybe some good advice versus some advice that you were kind of curious why you were actually getting it from certain people.
Yeah. I think good advice, some of the best advice I got came from my uncle, who's a cancer survivor. And he looked at me and he said, all my family calls me Pablo. And he said, "Pablo," he said, "pick your reason to live and then say it in your head every day." And he goes, "Because there will come a day when it just gets rough, it just gets brutal, and you sit down into the chemo chair, you go in for radiation, and you kind of go, why am I doing this?" Your body's going like, "What are you doing to me?" But if you have that reason in your head, if you can control the space between your ears, you can keep on fighting. And I thought that was some pretty phenomenal advice, to pick a reason and then just say it in your head every day. Worst advice? I don't know if it was advice so much as one or two people, and I know they said this with the best intentions, was, "Oh, this is a blessing in disguise." And you kind of go, well, no, it's not. It makes me aware of the blessings in my life, but I'll never say that cancer itself was a blessing in disguise. If it's in disguise, it's like the little rascals, kids on their shoulders. Like, you can spot it from pretty far away. It's not a good disguise.
All right.
So I think some of the weird things people say to you are said with the best intentions. But it's sometimes really like, just, you're like, why, what made that pop into your head? Like, why would you say that to a cancer patient?
So you said your uncle gave you the advice of pick a reason to live and say it in your head each day.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us what that reason was for you to live each day.
For me, it was, first off, it was my wife. And then from that, my extended family, my brother and sister and my parents. And I've absolutely phenomenal in-laws who I treat like a second set of parents, and they treat me like a son, and brother and sister-in-laws. And I love my family and my extended family so much that the years down the road of being with those people and the good times and the laughter, like that was my reason to live. And all the plans that my wife and I had made, I said, no, this isn't going to steal those things from us. And I just wasn't going to lose. If that makes sense, I just said, nah, this isn't how I'm going out.
Yeah, I've said this before to a lot of people, that what we mentally think, our body physically tries to respond to it. And if you're telling yourself, between those 5 inches between your ears, that you're not going to die, you're going to live, you're not going to lose this, your body is going to fight even harder to try to make that not happen. And, you think about how powerful your brain is, and your mind is, that's the thing we wrestle with, is our mind. Lots of times it's not necessarily our physical body. Now you have a physical element, but it's your mind. As you continue to take these treatments, continue to suffer from the side effects, continue to see people that look at you and worry about you and all those things, like that, those culmination of things are all coming through your mind. And you picked an amazing reason, obviously, with your family and stuff, but the very fact that you picked the reason that you're not going to lose was a daily reminder for you that, hey, I'm not going to get defeated by this. And today I'm going to make a choice, and that choice is going to be not to lose today. And I think sometimes with our lives, days can go by when we skip things that are really important to keep consistent. And so your advice right there of picking something each day, I would love for everyone listening to the podcast today to pick your reason why you want to live, say it to yourself, just like Paul did, and see how that dramatically changes your outlook in the next couple of weeks. So you're going through this. It's been 4 or 5 months as you're kind of picking up and going through the chemo, now to the radiation part. During each person's journey with cancer, we all come across pivotal moments, whether it's a collection of moments or either one moment specifically where maybe and lots of times that's your worst moment, where you're just like, I don't know if I can do this anymore kind of moment. But if you approach that in a healthy way, you'll turn that corner really hard, and you'll move towards not necessarily being a victim, but more of being more of an overcomer. And where you choose consistently not to let this thing beat you down, but for you to overcome this and then keep pushing towards the greatness and the plan that we all have specifically laid out for our lives. Can you share with our listeners today some of the moments, or either a moment in particular, where it really stands out to you, where you saw, as you mentioned, your faith, that you had to be strong and courageous a little more in that moment and really fight through that?
Yeah, I think kind of as I mentioned before, moment one was a really big moment for me. That you have cancer, you're 28, you have been married for 2 years, all like it was everything. It was the last thing you expect to hear, and it's the thing that shouldn't be happening. So for me, that initial moment of, okay, I've got it, let's fight it, let's go, like let's get in the ring. I know it's going to beat me up, but for every punch it gives me, I'm going to give 2 back. And so I think as I got to, especially as I was kind of in the middle of chemo and at that 4th round where I really didn't know if I was going to get to switch to radiation or if we'd keep going with chemo, to be able to look back on that moment where I said, nope, not today. You picked the wrong person. And those are the days where, you're in the middle of chemo, you look in the mirror and you don't see yourself. You see the person with thin to no hair, the you're missing eyebrows, you're skinny. So you look at this person, and to look back on someone who is quote unquote the version of you that you like to see was kind of strength giving, of saying, okay, at that point I said, I'm going to fight this. I'm going to beat the crap out of it. And you go, okay, I'm going to go back to that. And so I think it was the mentality I certainly had through this entire thing. And I'm not being disingenuous about that. I'm kind of an overly positive person. And that's not to say there aren't very scary, hard moments. In moments, I know when I was, finished my 8th treatment of chemo, I was sitting outside, and my wife had her hand on my back, and I was just crying because it was hard. It was just so hard. But even then, even when I felt my weakest, I knew I wasn't going to give up. I had too much to live for. There's too much going on, too many great things to say, okay, this is the thing that beats me.
So what made you not quit? Because you had a choice to, again, breaking down is not quitting. Breaking down is just you releasing the emotions that you have built up. Like what, when you remember sitting in that moment where your wife puts her hand on your back and you just kind of break down after your 8th treatment, like what jumped into your head that made you not quit?
I think her and my future plans is what was in my head at that moment. Whether that's, God willing, children down the road, or travel plans, or just living this life that I had promised her, that I wasn't going to let cancer take that from me, and I wasn't going to let it take it from her. And wanting to give her those things in that moment, was said, this isn't my demise, and I'm going to beat this so that I can give her all the things I promised I would give her. So I truly think, she was sitting there with her hand on my back, and when she put her hand on my back, I said, that's why I'm going. That for all the things we've laid in front of us, that's why I'm going.
So it's like your wife was almost a reminder to you at that moment to, again, as you break down, and you release all of that, emotional tension and everything that you have, like your wife is right there to remind you, hey, the person that's got their hand on my back right now is a person who's a main reason this, and then our future together is what I'm really fighting for. And I'm going to pick up these little pieces of this little crack, and I'm going to fill this crack with glue and keep going forward. How do you think your wife feels knowing that she's part of that? I call like 1% moments where, when you were at your lowest, that she was the reminder, or she was the person that really added that value to you to kind of pull you up and give you enough strength to keep climbing when you were stuck down in the valley that you were in?
I think she'd smile. I think I've told her that I've been able to be strong because she's been so strong during all this. And it's hard to put into words when you come home from chemo and you feel weak, or you feel destroyed, and there's someone there that is just a pillar. And there's a common phrase, and I think the cancer world, that no one fights alone. And I have the blessing of having, a family here in Houston, my family back in California, and I have my wife here every day. And, I just pray that each person going through this has that pillar that they can rely on. But I think my wife would be proud to know that she was the reason in that moment that kept me going. and I think she has the same hopes and dreams for all the things we've laid in front of us. And, that's what kept me going. I think, yeah, I think it'd make her smile.
That's one thing I love about your story, as we've talked about before, is, you mentioned no one fights alone. And just a reminder to everyone listening today, if you feel like you are alone, please reach out to us through the website, 1%podcast.com, and we'll connect you with the right people to help you walk through this time if you don't have someone specifically in your life right now that, you know, that's going to help you go through your journey at the moment. But you having your wife in your life, when your story has been laid out and written and is being currently written right now, the fact that you said, she asked you when you guys were talking about dancing and in the very beginning of the interview, you knew that you were going to marry her. I feel like when God places certain people in our lives, like when we just know, because we're looking, but we're not always like looking, I guess, for that person that's going to be forever or whatever. It just kind of comes into our life. But the very fact that has been equipped with all of these characteristics and all of these things that you needed, that you didn't know you were going to need, especially so early in your marriage, I think is a huge blessing. And you mentioned earlier about really looking for the blessings in your life, and you get to wake up to one every day. And it's not just her being a great wife and doing the traditional wife things that you enjoy and stuff like that, but it's someone who loans you her strength, her confidence, her grit, as you mentioned earlier, being a triathlete, to really go through this situation. And if she wasn't equipped with that, you wouldn't have had that readily available for you. So I think that's a huge blessing for you in general, is to be obviously married to someone like that who has enough to loan out to you and to give you that, that small percentage that you needed to keep fighting through the toughest time in your life. So I'm sure you really appreciate her. And, when she listens to this, I'm sure she'll really appreciate, hearing you say all those things about her and stuff. So,
Yeah.
So now that you're you're halfway through radiation right now, right? So tell us a little bit about how your life's starting to change now that there's a pre-cancer you and there's a post-cancer you. I know you're kind of like in the current cancer version, right? Where you're still going through your treatments and stuff, but how's your life been since you've adjusted to having cancer, having chemo, and now, on the tail end of hopefully all of your treatments with the radiation now? Like, how's your life adjusted to I guess, to the new lifestyle or your new approach or outlook to life?
Yeah, I think the day-to-day of having cancer, it becomes a weird routine, especially with radiation. Now I'm at the hospital every day. And so you kind of get into this odd cycle of showing up and waving to, the desk people. And, it's really, it's a weird cycle to get kind of in the groove of, but, we've adjusted. And, simple things like my wife eats really, really healthy. And I was always a healthy eater, but like making sure like I'm giving my body the fuel to fight cancer and kind of going beyond in that regard has been like a little lifestyle change. And I think there's little things like, people will take trips and I haven't been able to travel, and it kind of sucks to miss out on those things, but you realize on the back end of those things, I truly believe like my travel and the fun and, sitting on a patio, having a beer with buddies will be, twofold, having missed it during this time. But, we've tried to keep life as normal as possible within this craziness, because I think if you deviate too much from what your schedule was, it adds a bunch of kinks into the system that you really didn't need to have there. So I think I even during chemo, like I was going to work all but Thursday and Friday of chemo weeks. And then, my off weeks, I was there, pretty much 5 days a week. So trying my best to keep up with that. And my office was really great about giving me the leeway of, coming in late or leaving early if I was tired. But my wife and I, we've really tried to just keep things normal. And I think that's been really, really good for me. In saying no to missing out on, I can't do this, or I can't, go to a ball game because I don't have an immune system or something. It, in a weird way, it teaches you to make your yes, yes, and your no, no. We live in such an age when you can bow out of things at the last minute. And I think this has been a cool little reminder to, you don't always get to do things. So if you commit to something, commit to it.
So what piece of advice do you have for someone listening today that maybe needs a 1% boost in their life? Like, what do you, as they're going through, there's a life cycle of our journey, right? You have the beginning, again, the what do I do next kind of portion of it. Then you gear up and get strong, and then you get broken down and get weak. And then hopefully you get to the point where you start living for something that maybe you weren't living for before, or you just get the reminder of, hey, I'm living for this. What piece of advice do you have to give to someone listening today that'll give them that 1% they need to keep fighting and moving forward?
I think whether you're at the beginning or you're in the middle of your journey or kind of towards the end of it, I think the reminder coming from a cancer patient who's getting towards the end of it and kind of starting to look back a little bit now, is that you're a total legend already. Like you're fighting the fight, and pick your purpose and then step in the ring and go toe to toe with cancer. And if, maybe it's not cancer, maybe you're fighting something else, but I just implore you to pick a reason. And the reason can be small. It doesn't have to be, something incredibly drastic. And I think sometimes the small reasons are the best ones, because they're easy to grip onto. But that the fact that you're already fighting, means that you want to keep going. It means that you want to survive, because otherwise you wouldn't even engage. So just keep plugging away. You're a legend. You're doing it. So keep on going.
I love that. I've never even thought of that before. If you're already fighting, you're already winning because you haven't given up. And that's so huge. And hopefully everyone that's listening, if you have a chance to jot that down, that's definitely something I took. It's part of the notes I've been taking the whole time Paul's been talking, but that's something I'm not going to forget that you said. Paul, I like to end the show with a couple of quick personal questions so people get a chance to get to know you a little bit. And I know we talk about some pretty heavy stuff on the show, so a chance to finish on a little bit lighter note, and we can find out a little bit more about you, because that's what this podcast is about, is to really celebrate and highlight the people who are going through cancer or have gone through cancer, or either the support systems through cancer. And, just interviewing somebody like you is already huge for somebody like me and for people listening, because we get a chance to, really personally connect to your story. But I want to ask you 5 quick questions to get to know you a little bit more. And then we'll end the show and go from there. So tell us, you've told us a lot so far about this, but give us 2 quick things that motivate you every day.
Currently, right now, the idea of surfing again is definitely a motivator. I can't wait to do that once this is all over and I get my port taken out. And having a beer out on a patio with my buddies and my wife and family and stuff. Like, there's just little things you get rid of during cancer or can't do. And so I'm really looking forward to that, and maybe a sip of some good whiskey. So, but yeah, my wife and family, the good times ahead, and getting back in the water is what keeps me going.
Recommend some supplements or some products, or maybe it's food or something along those lines that helps you along the way to our listeners.
Yeah, wheatgrass powder It tastes like pond scum, but it does some wonders for your body. And you can get it on Amazon or at, Whole Foods or whatever, but there's a lot of literature that whether you're going through cancer or not, it's pretty good to have that stuff in your diet each day.
What's the last book you've read?
The Millionaire Next Door. It's a really cool look at finances and people who've saved up considerable sums of money by just living normal lives.
So you said your wife's a healthy eater. What's you guys' favorite recipe or food that you eat?
She's an incredible cook across the board. I think my favorite thing to make is I've mashed together a couple different recipes, but I've got a pretty solid Bavarian soft pretzel recipe that I make every now and then. And those are always kind of fun. So that's my favorite thing to make is Bavarian soft pretzels.
I have to stop doing these podcasts when I get hungry because I always
get
that question. Sounds amazing. And finally, what are 3 items that are on your bucket or life list that you want to accomplish from here on
out? My wife's never been to Europe, and that's on the bucket list. I think we're going to go next year, so we're really looking forward to that. I'd love to take a surf trip to Indonesia that I've never done before, and again is very high on the list. And then on kind of the life list, after all this, I would love to have just a happy and healthy family someday. I know that kind of sounds like a canned answer, but it's the truth. I would love to just have a brood of happy and healthy ones, and for my wife and I to just be taken along.
Well, if any of our listeners out there can help set up this trip to Europe for Paul and his wife, just let me know. I'll be happy to connect you guys, or the surf trip as well too. I like to put that out there because you never know who's listening, and if someone's got the resources to do something like that for someone as awesome as you, man, I would love to be able to make that happen for you. So,
well, thanks.
So just a recap of everything that we talked about, you were diagnosed a couple of weeks before your 28th birthday with stage 2 Hodgkin's lymphoma. And you really described your journey through your chemo, your current radiation, just the ups and the downs, the battle that you've had, the support you've had, and the reminders that you've had every day, from everything from the Bible verse, Joshua 1:9, that's written on your chest, to, the advice your uncle gave you of pick a reason to live and say it each day. And then finally to me, like that no one fights alone. And, you're already a legend right now because you haven't given up if you're still fighting. So those are, again, there's some of the takeaways that I got from our interview today, Paul. And it's a pleasure for me, man. I knew the first time we talked, I was like, God, we could probably be best friends if we lived closer. Just like listen.
I know.
Just listen to you chat. But it's been a true honor and a true pleasure to be able to share your story. And, I just think it's going to impact, so many people that you may never even meet. But your story and having the strength and the courage to share your story, especially as it's still being written right now, I think is going to be tremendous for all the people, and you just give them a desire to want to keep fighting, to be intentional and look for those 1% moments in their life and really hold on to that and really keep fighting and push forward. So Paul, I appreciate you being a guest on the show, and we will check back in with you whenever you're done. I'll give everybody an update on you, and just praying for blessings over you and your wife and your future family. Okay.
Perfect. Thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
We appreciate you spending time with us on today's episode and encourage you to continue the conversation to help you keep pushing forward. For more resources based on today's episode, as well as ways to recommend a guest and connect to Truett personally, head over to 1%podcast.com. Be sure to join us next time for more stories of inspiration right here with Truett Taylor on the 1% Podcast.